there, welcome back to Lessons Learned. This is Sherry, and I am here today to show you what I'm going to do with this panel. This month of September, Stash Timber, we're going to use those panels out of our stashes. I was going to call them pesky panels, but that doesn't seem very positive, does it? But they do tend to stack up in our stashes, and we don't do anything with them. So I'm hoping to give you some inspiration and ideas on what to do with them. Of course, you can always just finish them out the way they are. They're always pretty. But there's a lot of other things you can do to make them individual to your taste, to make them more interesting, to make them bigger. All sorts of ideas. Of course, you can always just add borders on also to make them bigger, but there's some creative things that we can do to use these panels in a very creative way and turn out a really nice project with them. So using fabrics from our stashes, we want to use those to add to our panels this month. I happen to have a piece of fabric that actually goes with this line. This is the Stonehenge Sun Valley 2 line, the panel, and then I have a good piece of yardage here, probably 2 or 3 yards that I can use with it. And then I'm also going to use this also. I was trying to go with something a little more this range, but I didn't have it, and I think this will do just fine. So I went out to Pinterest. I went to some of the pattern companies, some of the fabric companies that show free patterns and also sell patterns, and just kind of got some inspiration from them, and I'm just going to kind of come up with my own little sort of idea here. Probably all of you have seen how you can take a pattern or a panel and split it into several pieces and then put something in between, and it kind of gives that window effect, not the attic window, but you know, the long narrow window effect. If you hear my dog crying in the background, he's just wanting my attention. So what I have decided to do is I want to kind of mimic this shape here in this mountain, but in a little more of an organized way. And instead of making the outer strips progressively shorter on both ends, I'm just going to do it at the top. So I'll have a center here going up, and that'll be my main piece. And then my successive pieces out to the side will drop a little bit lower, but go all the way down. And another one a little bit lower and go all the way down. And then the same descending order this way on this side. So what I needed to do was make sure I had my panel completely square. So what I did is I pinned it onto my board, and I measured over and made sure that this measurement was the same in several places all the way up and down. And that way, when I go to draw my lines on here where I'm going to cut the panel, because you only have one chance to cut the panel, it'll be straight, or it'll be pretty darn close to straight. So as I said before, I was going to leave the sun in the middle as a you know, like the feature part of the panel of the project, and then just find a point of reference in here as well to line up with that. So I kind of had to go in the middle of this little piece here, this little motif here, and then there's a little diamond here. So I'm just going to match up with that. And then fortunately my yardstick is long enough that I can see where to catch that same motif down here and right through the middle. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark that. And then this diamond here is going to allow me to straighten up my line towards perpendicular. That didn't come quite out as like I wanted. Hold on just a second here. This is just a chalk pen that I'm using. You probably won't be able to see my lines, but they are there. One little light place right here. See if I can get that to darken up a little bit. I think I'm going to go get a different chalk. There's a triangular. I think because I'm on too sharp of an angle here, I can't get my chalk pen to work. So I'll use this Taylor's chalk, and it's doing a great job. Yes. For some reason, that one little spot there on the blue does not want to show. There we go. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm leaving, let's see, right about here. So halfway through here. So halfway into this one is what I want to do. Okay, so after I marked this line, I measured, this is 9.5, and I'm measuring from the actual edge of the motif, 9.5, and then I want to do that same 9.5 over here. So I'm going to mark that in a few places and then connect. If you don't have a design board to do this on, you can do it on your kitchen table or on the floor or on your top of your bed. Just lay something stable on your bed, like if you have a giant piece of cardboard or something like that, so you can mark. Okay, so it's about right there. And let me get me a mark down here. 9.5 would be right there. Okay, so that's our center section from here to here. We're going to leave that size, but these two we're going to cut in half. Each of these sides we're going to measure right in half. So half of 9.5 is 4 1/4. So we want to go over 4 1/4. Nope, it's not 4 1/4. 4 3/4. So since this is 9.5, or 9.5 here and here, we're going to want to split that in half. So we're going to wind up with 5 pieces. And that's the thing too, is you want to make sure you have an odd number of strips when you're done. You don't want to end up with an even number. Okay, so half of 9.5 is 4 3/4. So let's measure 4 3/4. That's pretty cool. That ended up right in the middle of that. Okay, let's see if we get the same result on this side. Looks like it. Okay, match these up and make one solid line. Measure that again. Yeah. Yep, right in the middle of that one. Perfect. Okay, so now what's left to do is cut. So I'm going to take this down and cut it out on my lines. I'm going to cut off all of this excess white on here. You can leave a 1/4 inch of that showing if you want to use as your seam allowance, but make sure it's not going to show on your project on the front side. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off because I don't want to deal with that. All right. Okay, so I have all of my pieces cut here, and the one thing that I will have to figure out now is how much difference do I want to make the tops, because I will have to cut a section of this off on these other pieces. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. It looks good like that. You could just do it like that and put your other fabric in between. But I want to change it up a little bit. So this little strip at the top is somewhere around, looks like 3.5, a little bit less, 3 3/8. I'm going to take these off and move them down by that much to here. And then I'm going to take this one off and move it down another section, I believe. I will lose some of my sun rays doing that, but I think it will look pretty cool. Maybe I'll just take it down a little bit. Maybe I'll take it down like 1 inch and this one like 2 inches. And then I'll still get my mountain effect, but it won't lose all of my sun rays. Possibilities are endless here, but I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to cut this off right here and cut about 1 inch off of this and move this down. And then I'm going to take 2 inches off of this one and move this down to here. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so taking into account the goal was to remove 1 inch, then I have a half inch of seam allowances. So once I cut this off, I only had to cut a 1/2 inch off of this because the other 1/2 inch is in my seam allowances. Okay, so there, that's a very gentle curve down. I don't know if it's enough. I think I'll go ahead and do my 2-inch piece and see if I like that gentle curve, because I don't really want to lose my sun rays so much, and we'll go from there. Okay, so here's my 2-inch one. There we go. I think what's going to help too is to put a little more space between these, and I think that's going to add the gentle curve effect that I want. Actually, I'm not really wanting a curve effect. I'm wanting kind of like an Alamo effect, if you know what I mean. But it's good to take just a little off first and then decide if it's enough, because you can't put it back on as easily as you can take more off. So I'm going to have to look at that for a minute and decide. I think that's what I want to do right there. So now I just need to do these two sides. This is my 1 inch and this is my 2 inch. 1 inch, 2 inch. Okay, lesson learned. Listen to your gut. I went ahead and changed them a little bit. So I did 2 inches and 3 inches, taking into consideration seam allowances of a 1/4 inch. And then that ended up making my border pieces or my background pieces 2 1/4 is what you cut them at. 1/4 inch seam allowances in there, so 2 inches, and then 3 1/4. This one was 3 1/2 is what you cut it at, and then sewn in 3 1/4, of course. And I think that's going to be just right. So now what I want to do is do my inside pieces, my strips here for my background, and I think I'm going to probably make it about 3 inches, not including the seam allowances. So I'm going to cut them at 3 inches and then sew those in, the interior only for now. Alright, it's been a minute since I last showed you something, but I went through some trials and tribulations with quilt math, but I finally got it figured out. I did change some of my measurements a little bit up there, so what's going on here now is your 2 outer pieces of background you need to be cut at 3.5 before they're sewn in. So there, and then here it's 2.5. So 3.5 and 2.5 on your little top pieces to make that lower. I think I would have liked to have went even a little bit lower right here, but that's okay, it looks fine. And then these borders I cut at 3.5, so when they're sewn in they're 3. And you can make them varying widths if you want. You just have to do your own quilt math with it. I'm happy with this Moda Marbles that's in here, even though it's a little bit lighter than what's in the panel originally. I think it goes very well. And I really like how these Southwest stars here are cut exactly in the middle. And I have the exact measurement of this panel in the description box, along with these measurements I'm giving you. And there has been some changes in the measurements as I've gone along. If the first part of the video, you may have heard me throw out some measurements, but these are the final ones. I am going to put 2 more a border like this on the outside and then on the top, and then I'm going to figure out what to do to use this. And then we'll go on to some quilting as well on this, something very simple. Alright, I'll be right back. Alright, so now it's time to figure out these borders that I want to put on. After much contemplation, I decided to use this beautiful turquoise grunge. And then, of course, I've got my fabric that matches the panel. And I've went ahead and put a narrow, very narrow border on the outside of the panel there, where I had stopped on the last clip. This is 1.5 inches unsewn, so it'll be 1 inch once it's sewn in. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see on this fabric here, for another border, for the outer border and the final border, I want to use this, but I don't want to get too wide with the border. Now I could just cut this with the fabric or length of fabric, whatever, to make my borders, but there's definitely a pattern in there. As you can see, it's kind of a crosshatch sort of plaid pattern with those triangles and diamond shapes in there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow this pattern here for my borders, and for across the top as well of the panel. And I have measured from just outside it that's about 1/4 inch from here to there. So I'm thinking if I could go another 1/4 inch, I could probably sew in 1/4 inch, and then my binding. I don't know, I have to think about that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this up into some strips anyway, somewhere around the 4 to 5 inch width to put around it, and I'll be back to tell you what happened. Okay, so here's what I did. I did about a 3 inch border. Actually, I cut a 6 inch strip lengthwise out of that fabric for the edges, for that last border, and then I cut that in half, so roughly 3 inches all the way around. I contemplated doing the entire 6 inch pattern that was on that fabric, but it just seemed to be too much. So I just went ahead and cut them down to half and used those. And I think that's just perfect. I considered mitering the borders, but that wasn't really going to accomplish anything. So being that they were just the 3 inches, didn't really have to miter them. Can't really tell where the pattern begins and ends on that. So now all is left to do is the basting to get it ready for quilting. So that will be the next clip. So I have my quilt sandwich here, and I have this all basted down with pins and spray glue, and I've started to do some quilting on it. I'm just doing a wavy line with the walking foot on my Baby Lock Jazz 2, and I'll just let you watch me do that for a little bit. So as you can see, ever so often I go ahead and let the lines cross, kind of giving that kind of windy kind of look across through there. Sometimes I do have to, you know, adjust my fabric to make sure I don't have any super big wrinkles or anything like that. But the more irregular it is, the better it looks. And you can use this on any kind of quilt project. I especially like to use it on table runners because the span is not very wide across if you're going from one side to the other, from one width to the other. So I'm just going to continue on with this. I've got about, I don't know, a quarter of it done here. So I'm going to continue on until I get all the way up to the top. Okay, so the quilting is done, and actually the binding is done as well, but I just wanted to mention a few things about the quilting. Going from side to side like that did create some waves, but I'm not hating it. Like for here for example, right here, they're pretty flat, really, but with the light shining on it, you can really see that, but it kind of adds another dimension to it. Little bit of a lesson learned though on a bigger quilt, going from one end to the other and then back. Does some interesting stretching with these long strips that I've done. But then again, I'm not hating it. It does give them kind of that wavy look. You can really see it there. See that, how wavy it is? But that's just the nature of free motion quilting on a domestic machine. You're just going to have some of that on a bigger quilt. Of course, this turned out way bigger than I originally thought that it would. I'm going to put it up on the board so you can see it a little better. Okay, there's the full picture of it. I think it turned out pretty nice. The binding that I used was a very dark green. It was a Andover Juicy Juice fabric, like a basic, I guess you could call it. Has that little tiny speck in it, but it really reads as just a dark green from back here, which goes really well with the really dark cactus in the panel. So I'm happy with how this turned out overall. And let me show you the back. And there's the back. Lots of piecing done there. I just used whatever I had left over. Perfectly fine for a backing for a wall hanging or a couch quilt, whatever this would be. Alright, so here's the finished project, and we hope that you gleaned some things from this method of using a panel. I'll put all of those measurements in the description box so that you can copy this exact size panel method that you could use for your panel. It doesn't have to be this exact Stonehenge panel. There are a lot of panels a standard size, and I'll list that size in the description box so that you can use my exact measurements, which I'll also provide if you have one of this particular size. So this was a fun project. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope you did too. And we will be back here next Wednesday for another panel idea. So we'll see you soon, and if you have any questions about this, just go ahead and send me an email or leave a comment. All right, have fun. Bye.